Hey gang, this is Masad Ayub from the Pro Arms Podcast. I'm here to remind you that our podcast is a member of the Self-Defense Radio Network, and I'm going to suggest you do what we do and check out the other podcasts at selfdefenseradio.net.
Welcome to Unload and Show Clear, the podcast about all things IDPA. And now, here's your host, living proof that without practice, there's no limit to how little you can accomplish, Lloyd Bailey.
Welcome to another episode of Unload and Show Clear. All too often, gun owners and gun culture are portrayed in the worst possible ways in the media. This podcast aims to counter that narrative by shining a light on the members of gun culture who are involved in IDPA, International Defensive Pistol Association. Now, while IDPA members make up just a tiny fraction of the overall gun-owning public, I think they're a representative cross-section of that demographic. From all walks of life, rich, poor, and in between, young and old, men and women, patriotic, caring, friendly, and outgoing. And this podcast is about them. Today, you're going to meet one of these awesome people. Now, before we get started, I want to talk to you about Gun Mag Warehouse. Do you need more magazines? Who doesn't, right? Magazines wear out over time, they get damaged, they get lost, and depending on the state you're in, they might get banned. Maybe you just, you got a new gun, you need extra magazines for it, or maybe you want some magazines to set aside to use for dry fire. Make sure that you've got plenty by visiting Gun Mag Warehouse. I use them myself, the prices are great, shipping is fast. Visit unloadpodcast.com/mags, and when you buy, we'll earn a small commission to help keep the lights on here at Unload and Show Clear. So go visit them at unloadpodcast.com/mags. All right, time to get on with the show. Here is today's special guest. Our guest today is Ashton Lawrence from Merritt, Texas. Ashton, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here.
How old are you?
I'm 15.
Good grief. You're just a sophomore in high school, right? You started your sophomore year this year, correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, I saw pictures that your mom had posted on Facebook of you blasting watermelons at age 8. So you got an early start with guns, right?
Absolutely.
So what, besides IDPA, what kind of things have you been doing?
Well, I hunt sometimes with my dad in Oklahoma on some property we own. Mm-hmm. And when I go up to my grandparents' house, we shoot a lot, shoot his rifles, shoot shotguns, pistols, all sorts of things.
And I saw you shooting some long-range stuff
yes.
Not too long ago. Tell me about that. That looked like fun.
It was. So at our gun range, we have a club that comes out, North Texas PRS, and they do long-range matches. So I decided one day I'd like to participate in one. So I went up there, and I had a bunch of friends my dad had met and I had met, and they showed me kind of how to do it, and it was just a lot of fun. It ended up being like a lot of fun, and you got to shoot a lot, and it was just a heck of an experience.
Very cool. What was the farthest target you had to shoot at?
I think the farthest we shot at was maybe 800 yards.
Holy cow. All right, that does sound fun. I'm going to have to come up to Merritt. So now I remember the first time I met you and your parents was in 2015 at the Oklahoma State match. It had rained all week.
Oh, yes.
And your parents were the SOs of the standard stage that weekend. And at the end of the bay where the targets were placed was just standing full of water. And I've got I still have a photo of you and your dad. You had on these huge rain boots, and you were wading out into the water to get the targets to bring them back to score them. That seems like an eternity ago. What do you remember about that match?
Well, I remember that day we'd get to that bay, and my mom was like, wow, this is just standing water. And so she actually had to drive to the nearest target and buy me and my dad some rain boots. And so I remember having to run down there. Water was just splashing everywhere. It was like going to a swimming pool almost, just not as high.
What was it like shooting that match? That was your first sanctioned match too, right?
Yes, it was on my birthday, so it was like I was officially starting IDPA, and it it was amazing. I met a lot of new people there, like yourself. Chris Smith was one of them, and it was just, I never shot a sanctioned IDPA match before. So when I got there, I was like really nervous. I was like, what am I going to do? Am I going to do good? What's going to happen? But through the match, my parents were helping me. The people on our squad were helping me, and it ended up being a lot of fun. And then I got to work the match that next day, and waiting in the water was like, it was just a lot of fun shooting that match.
Well, I remember too when you weren't hauling in the targets, you were like milling around, hanging out with the shooters, and like giving us pep talks and stuff, and it was really cool. And yes. I remember you mentioning that it was your birthday. That was pretty neat.
Yes, I was giving all sorts of pep talks. I guess I thought I could give you all pep talks and kind of boost your morale.
Considering how I was shooting that weekend, that was the best part. So now here we are, just a little over 3 years later, and you're one of IDPA's newest and youngest masterclass shooters in ESP.
Yes, sir.
What did it take to get from that SSP novice waiting in the water in Oklahoma to masterclass? Do you have a job too? I mean, you're 15, so you don't have a job yet.
Well, actually.
Oh, do you?
Yes, I work at a barbecue restaurant. I started this summer. So.
Oh, okay. So with school and all your other activities, what is your practice schedule like? What does it take to, at your age, to make that jump from just getting started to being one of the best shooters in your division?
Well, I mean, I practiced a lot with my parents, and then I actually got some training from Chris Smith. I used to go to the range, and he would give me some training. I practiced with him for 2 months, and that's actually right before I got my first bump at Battle in Benton. And it was just, he like taught me a lot of things, and then I started practicing those things from him that he had taught me. And so after that, I was like really determined that I wanted to be the youngest ESP Master that had ever come to IDPA at my age. And so I started practicing a lot. I tried to balance things between baseball, golf, school, working with my parents. So
that is quite a schedule. So you play basketball or baseball and golf as well?
Yes, sir.
Very good. What's your favorite? Which do you prefer?
I like baseball, and I recently just got onto the high school varsity team. But I mean, there's only a varsity, so I mean, we're that small of a school.
Well, very good. Congratulations. What position you play?
I did play catcher, but now I'm playing outfield or bench.
Well, if I know anything about how you work at things, you're going to end up you're not going to be on the bench for long. So what kind of practice are you doing? A lot of dry fire? Are you going and doing a lot of live fire, or how are you balancing that?
I do a lot of live fire mostly. I haven't really gotten to the dry fire because every time I try to start it, I don't get very consistent. But I'm really working on getting more consistent with dry firing because I want to make distinguished master in the next year at the next IDPA Nationals.
That would be amazing. What is your choice of? You switched from SSP to ESP at the end of 2016. Why did you do that?
Well, I mean, with the rules that were there, my parents decided that we could like modify my gun, and when after we did that, it made me ESP. So I kind of just stuck with it. And then I actually switched to an STI Trojan that had a magwell on it, had a different grip on it, so it made it ESP as well. So I just stuck with ESP for the continuing years.
So what is your gun of choice currently? Is it still the STI, or have you graduated onto something else?
My favorite gun which I'm shooting right now, is the STI Hawk. It's a 2011, or it's a double stack 1911, but it's called a 2011.
Right. What do you like about that one? What is it about that one that you like so much?
I like it so, I don't know why I like it so much. It just kind of clicked with me. It's just like, it kind of fits me. There's hardly any recoil. The magwell, it just makes it perfect almost.
You just know when you get your hands on it that this is the one, right?
Yes.
So you got your match bump to master at the 2018 Gulf Coast Regional.
Yes.
Tell us about what you remember about that match as you went through it, and then having your name called at the end.
So 3 months prior to that, I had just got bumped to expert. So I was like, it was my second match as an expert. I was like, all right, I just want to place at least top 7. That's my goal. There's 14, I believe, and I just wanted to place top 7. So I had gone through that match. I made a few mental errors, like most people do. And I had got to one of the stages, and it was one where you're in a swimming pool, and you had to like grab your gun off a table and shoot targets at the swimming pool. And I tried to get really in tempo with it, so I was shooting like just in consistency because the targets were pretty much lined up. And after that stage, I heard him call it the raw time, and I was like, I think maybe a 14 or 15, and then I was 1 point down, so I was like, oh yeah, that's really cool. And so I had that like mindset that I was doing really well. And then my last stage, I had made a like really bad mistake. I had almost missed a target completely, and then I just made 2 fast shots at it and went 3-3. And so, but luckily, when we finished that match, I had loaded up. We were in our truck looking at the stages, trying to get them to load. And they called me up and they said, we need you to reshoot that stage. We didn't get your score on that. And I was like, holy cow. It was like, that's a miracle. There's no way this happened. So I reshot it. I ended up doing way better than the first time. And so I was like, all right, I have a chance to place top 7 this time. So me and my dad, my dad and I were sitting at the edge of his truck trying to get the stages scores to load, and they wouldn't load. And so I was just like, well, how am I going to know this? And so I didn't know this at the time, but my dad was actually tricking me. He had already known that I had got first place, and I didn't know this. So I'm like freaking out. I'm like, Dad, we need to talk to him. The scores aren't loaded. There's something wrong. He's like, all right. And I told the dude, and I don't know if he was in on it or not, but so he just said, all right, I'll look at him. And so we were standing there, and the scores were getting called. I was nervous. I was like, well, maybe I got 3rd place. I don't know. Maybe I got 4th place. And so I was just freaking out. And I remember them calling 2nd place, and it wasn't me. And I was heartbroken. I was like, dang, I didn't do as well as I thought. And then they said, 1st place, Ashton Lawrence. I was like, no way. And I told my dad, I'm like, no, they made a mistake. And so I went up there, and it was just amazing. So I don't know how it happened. So.
Well, sometimes you get into the zone and it just clicks, and you don't really realize until it's all over how well you did. I noticed when you stop worrying about how you're doing, you seem to do better.
Yes, absolutely.
And that last stage that you had to reshoot, a lot of times that can go really wrong.
Yes.
Every time I've had to reshoot a stage, it always comes out worse.
Yes, I hear that all the time, and most of the time that does happen to me. It's like a 1 in 5 chance that the reshoot's actually going to go well.
What kind of stages, what kind of matches do you really like? What do you like when you grab a hold of a matchbook and you start going through and looking at the stages? What jumps out at you and you say, "Oh, that looks like so much fun! I can't wait to do that." What kinds of stages do you really enjoy shooting?
I really enjoy stages where there's like props, like desks. At Colorado, we recently had to sit on a bicycle and shoot targets, and that was a lot of fun. And I like them when there's a lot of like swingers or drop turns, stuff like that, because it's like more of a challenge, and you're like, all right, I wonder how I'm going to pull this off. So you're like thinking the whole time, how am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? And it's just a lot of fun to do it like that.
How long did it take you to develop the mental part of it? Because that seems to be, to butcher an old Yogi Berra line about the game being 90% of the game being, or 50% of the game being 90% mental. It doesn't matter how much skill you've got if you don't sort of figure out the mental part of it. How long did it take you to figure that out and start game planning and figuring out how you could work a stage?
I mean, it took me a while. I was on a squad with a bunch of people who were high level. They were like masters experts at the time. I was a sharpshooter. And so I was like, man, these people must have a lot of wisdom, which they did. And they're like telling me ways to game the stage, ways to get better, fix this, maybe dump rounds here, do reload there. And I was like, oh, why didn't I think of that? And so over the years, I've started developing like a way to think of a stage differently and not just look at it. And then my mom, she actually made me read this book before all the matches. She recently stopped making me. And it was a book about the shooter's mindset and like what you had to think, what you had to do, and stuff like that.
Lord, she didn't make you read Brian Enos's book, did she?
No, she did not.
I have about 15 copies that I've won off of prize tables over the year. If you'd like a copy, I'll bring one to you. If thinking through some of the things that you've done, getting back to the stages, what's one that stands out in your mind aside from that when you're sitting in the pool that you remember and you think, wow, that was really crazy or that was really fun from any of the matches that you've shot over the last 3 years?
If I had to think really hard, there was one in Arkansas, and it's the house one that's run every year at Fall Brawl and Razorback Shootout.
Right.
And one year it was like you had to go to all these different positions of cover, and I was just so stressed out. I was like, man, I'm going to forget one. I'm going to forget this. And I ended up doing really well. And it was like my first time shooting a house stage, and I ended up doing really well on the stage. And I was like, so it kind of gave me the confidence for future years of house stages to shoot that, and it just made it really fun in that case.
That's a cool bay. That kind of jigsaw house where they can move the walls around is really neat.
Yes, it took a lot of brilliant engineering, probably.
When you meet other kids at school and you tell them what you did over the weekend, what kind of reactions do you get?
A lot of them, they don't believe me, and they're like, oh, there's no way you do that. And so I tell a bunch of them, I show them videos, and they're like, all right, maybe, but I probably shoot better than you. And that's always the hardest reaction, is just, I shoot better than you.
Well, they've got the Call of Duty experience. That's
right.
Probably.
They all think they're pros from Call of Duty.
Have you ever run into anybody who is sort of not pro-gun or kind of anti-gun, or gives you any kind of grief about it?
Not really. I mean, there's someone, I feel sometimes that they're just like, oh, wow, that's weird. Why are you competitively shooting? But I mean, where I live, it's a bunch of gun people. We all like guns. We all shoot guns. It's a country type environment. So
we are in Texas, so that's true.
Absolutely.
Do you ever get any of your friends, or asking about it, or curious? And if you do, what do you tell them about the sport? What is it about IDPA that you love so much that keeps you, aside from the fact that your parents drag you to matches? What is it that that makes IDPA so much fun for you? What is it you love about it?
Well, my principal actually has been asking me a lot about it, and he wants to come out to our local matches and shoot it. And I tell him it's just a lot of fun. It's like you get experience shooting a gun, first of all, and shooting guns are just amazing. Like, why wouldn't you do it? And then there's just the stages are challenging. You kind of have to think, and I like the challenge of having to think, because it's just fun to me to have to think about things or come up with ideas on how to shoot this stage. And another part I like about IDPA is you get to shoot stages that may not always be like a normal, like you may have never seen them before, and then they just pop up, and it's like, how do people come up with this? Like, who took 24 hours to come up with this one stage that's completely challenging?
Yep. I like to call it high-speed problem solving with a gun when I explain it to people. Well, Ashton, congratulations on making Master. I know you're going to do even greater. I have no doubt you're going to end up Distinguished Master within the next couple of years. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, that's all we've got for you today. Thank you so much to our special guest for coming on the show. If you know somebody in the IDPA community who deserves some recognition, I'd love to talk to them. Send me an email at Lloyd, LLOYD, at unloadpodcast.com. Check out the show notes for today's episode and listen to past episodes at unloadpodcast.com. And if you like what you hear on the show and you'd like to support us, help keep the lights on, pay the bills, we would love your support. Visit patreon.com/unload and make a small monthly contribution to help continue what we're doing here. Tune in again next week for another edition of Unload and Show Clear.